United States is made by immigrants. So, and all our rights are being compromised by this president. He has no respect for you, the media, for us, the Americans.
I've ordered the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to coordinate on a plan to destroy transnational criminal cartels which are all over the United States. We've taken historic action to secure the southern border, and I've ordered the construction of a great border wall, which will start very shortly.
Welcome back to The World Over. As you heard, new immigration enforcement guidelines issued by the Department of Homeland Security this week have caused another firestorm of controversy. These guidelines seek to flesh out the president's executive order that was blocked by the Ninth Circuit a few weeks ago. Here to take a closer look at the new guidelines and cut through the exaggeration and the hyperbole is the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies here in Washington, D.C., Mark Krikorian. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with why this new executive order that's in the offing, as well as these guidelines, how do they cure the court's problems with the Trump initiative on immigration?
There are two different things, remember. The guidelines are implementing earlier executive orders that actually weren't held up in court. This is just kind of putting flesh on the bones of what the president had directed. The pending change to the travel pause executive order, because they're talking about the revised version of it. What they're talking about is explicitly putting in there some of the provisos that they made, for instance, that green card holders it wouldn't apply to. If you have a green card and you're from Yemen and you go abroad and come back, well, no, non-immigrant visa, which is to say visitor visa. They're called technically non-immigrant visas. Those things it actually would apply to. It's immigrant visas or a green card. An immigrant visa is what an immigrant needs to get into the country, and then the green card is the actual thing you have that shows you're a legal resident.
How will this change the government's position to illegal immigrant children who cross the border alone?
That is in those memos that relate to the two executive orders that were before this travel ban. One on border, one on interior. And one of the important things in there is that it's not that the government is no longer going to be using a law that was for trafficked children. In other words, those that are coerced, like kidnapped for the sex trade or something, use those protections for regular illegal immigrant kids whose parents are in the United States and they pay smugglers to bring them here. Those are not unaccompanied minors. The smugglers accompany them all the way to the border, and then they point out the Border Patrol truck and say, okay, kids, go there. You have your phone numbers with you, right? Go and turn yourselves in, and they'll take you to your parents. So the point is to cut down on that. And one of the provisions in this memo is that parents who are paying smugglers to bring their kids through Mexico to the United States can be prosecuted. I mean, they may or may not, but the point is they may well be prosecuted.
Talk for a moment about the expedited removal, which is something that was used very limitedly in recent years. The Trump administration is broadening it, including those who've been here for less than 2 years. It used to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you were within 100 miles of the border, you faced expedited removal. Now that has been opened up nationwide.
Right, and that is actually making use of the authority that Congress gave the president literally more than 20 years ago in the 1996 law. That's where this expedited removal basically means the immigration officer with a second check from his supervisor can decide whether you're going to leave, were you deported or not, without getting into the pipeline for the whole immigration judge thing.
Wow. So no judicial review on it?
No, because unless you're applying for asylum, political asylum, then the point is to give ICE tools to get people out quickly and not clog up the system.
Why are we seeing the reaction? And let's face it, we've heard from a number of Catholic bishops, we've heard from public policy folks, you see these protests breaking out across the country. Why this reaction if all that's being done is the enforcement of the law as it is on the books? Because no laws have been changed
No, not yet, because a lot of people are not for enforcement of the law. In other words, for instance, this expedited removal, Congress passed it in 1996, but a lot of the same people complaining about it were against it at the time. So they're doing whatever they can to prevent it from actually being implemented.
Critics of these policies say all this will do is force those who are already here illegally and without papers deeper into hiding.
What this effect will do, what this is likely to do, is one, dissuade some potential illegal immigrants who aren't here yet from coming, as well as persuading some who are already here that maybe they really ought to pack up their families and go home before they get arrested.
What do you make of the DACA law, which continues to stand? Now, this is the deferred action for children.
Not children.
Well, they
young people who came as children.
Right. They call them as they call it children, but actually they can be young adults, and in some cases are fairly old adults.
Right.
The president vowed during the campaign to get rid of this law. It's still on the books. He's taken no action.
And in fact, the memo that was released this week specifically exempts that. In other words, specifically keeps that.
750,000.
750,000, and it's a 2-year thing. So what's happening is every day there are people who are coming up for renewal, and the administration is renewing, not only renewing the expiring work permits for these people, it's issuing new ones to people who don't have them. It's really quite, I mean, I understand the president is torn on what to do with this, the White House is torn, but I think they really don't know what to do, because if they had a plan, they would, for instance, stop issuing new ones and say we're going to stop renewals at the end of the year, so Congress lets you and I work on how to fix this. Because really they are a sympathetic group of illegal immigrants. I'm even for giving them green cards, but not on its own. Only as part of a package that, for instance, passes some important enforcement or immigration reduction measures that the president can't do on his own.
Are you concerned, I know some in the religious community certainly will be, the president, after vowing that his immigration plan, particularly vis-a-vis refugees, would carve out Christians and religious minorities, that is now being stricken in the new executive order that's being talked about.
Yeah, almost certainly. And the thing is, there's no reason for it, because the law specifically says the president can exclude any class of aliens, any alien or any class of aliens he wants, for any reason. So the efforts by the courts on the West Coast to stop this are not based in law. They are naked acts of political power, not legal decisions by judges.
So the president can carve out, if you will, those religious minorities and grant them refugee status, which exists in other part of the federal code.
We give refugee status to various religious groups already, and it's written in the law. There's something called the Lautenberg Amendment, which at this point is out of date, but it would give people from the former Soviet Union presumptive refugee status if they're Jewish, evangelical, or belong to the Ukrainian Catholic or Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Well, that's a pretty clear religious carve-out, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. And Frank Lautenberg's been out of Congress for how long at this
time.
point? Let's talk about the cost of the wall. Yeah, let's talk about the cost of the wall. People are saying, look, this is trillions of dollars you're talking about here. What, $12 billion they're saying now? And that it's simply too much. It's not worth this much money. You wrote a piece this week arguing otherwise.
Well, we're talking 12 or 15 billion is the estimates they're talking about. Maybe it'll be more. Look, it's a government construction project, so it'll probably, there'll be cost overruns. But the fact is, we actually crunched the numbers on this, and we found that even if it stopped only 12% of the expected future flow of illegal immigrants, it would pay for itself in 10 years. And that's if it were minimally effective. Now, I think there are other things more important than border enforcement. We need to focus on employers and turning the magnet of jobs off. We need to make sure that visitors leave when their time is up. We don't do that very well now, and most new illegal aliens actually come in on visas and don't leave, and a wall doesn't matter to those people. But we do need some extra border enforcement, and the idea that it's somehow so outlandish and so incredibly unaffordable and all that, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's just not true.
What would you say to those in our final minute here who say, we're a nation of immigrants, this is repelling immigrants, it is against our core values as Americans? You hear this line again and again. You'd say what?
If we're going to be admitting immigrants, we either have to decide we're going to let in anybody who wants unlimited immigration, or if there are limits, which everybody pretty much acknowledges, those limits have to be enforced. And that's the question: is are we willing to enforce whatever the rules are we set? If we're not, then come out and openly argue for unlimited immigration and open borders. If you're not going to do that, then all we're doing is negotiating about how to enforce those limits that you have already agreed to.
Mark Krikorian, thank you so much for being here.